And that's okay, what you give me. Where I am.
Good to go. Yes. Hi, everyone. I see people joining us. I'm here with Karen Ann Murray. We're so happy to be here. And we are here broadcasting live, and we're so excited to be here to celebrate Chef Karen Ann Murray's Tea Table, which I have been so excited to read and get to know. And in just a moment, I will introduce Karen, who is here with us, and we will get right into the book. She's going to talk us through some of the pages, the photographs, the recipes, and the origins of the book. So I'm really excited about it. But before we get started, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the events platform and some upcoming events we have. Hi, my name is Carol Centers, and I'm the events director here at Bookshop Santa Cruz, where I'm broadcasting. And we are in a Zoom webinar here together. So we can't see or hear you at home. So you are perfectly safe in the privacy of your home, but we are here together, and I welcome you to drop a line in the chat if you feel so inclined. We love seeing where people are joining us from, and we love to gather here together in this virtual space. So if you would like to, just make sure your messages go to everyone so that we can all see where you're joining us from. Also, closed captioning is automatically available, and you can hide it if you'd like, but that is there for everyone. And this event is also being recorded so that you can rewatch any moments that you might miss. We will send a link out to that tomorrow, and we'll also have it on our YouTube page. So if you miss any favorite moments, you can go back and rewatch those. We will have an audience Q&A later in the evening, but we welcome you to drop in those questions as they occur to you at any point. There's a tab at the bottom of your screen that says Q&A, and that is where you can enter in your questions for Chef Karen Ann Murray. Can't wait to get to those later. We definitely encourage you also to buy the book. We have both hardcover and paperback copies, and they're all signed in beautiful purple ink. So I know you're going to want a copy of this book. Yesterday, when Karen came in to sign some final copies, she pointed out that the book's actually wonderful for children too, which didn't occur to me at first, but I definitely am now going to get a copy for some of the little ones in my life as well. So I encourage you to do the same. I also want to let you know about a couple of upcoming events we have on the calendar. We have an in-person event next week with Cara Black that's going to be here in the store, our first one back after 2 years of being virtual in the store. And then we also have a virtual event on April 14th for Felicia Cocotzin Ruiz for her book Earth Medicines, which is also about food and recipes and culture. So we're really excited for that one as well. Hope you can join us. Just check back on our website for more upcoming events. And we're just thrilled to have our events program going strong thanks to all of your support. But now on to the main attraction. Born and raised in England to Jamaican parents, Karen now lives with her family in California. And 2021 was an important year for Karen. It marked 35 years since she completed her chef training in Birmingham, England, and began working as a chef. And it marked the 20th anniversary of her business, Eddison and Melrose, which is named after her mom and dad. Eddison and Melrose specializes in Teatime Creations and the manufacturing of Karen Ann's granola. And in celebration of that special landmark, Karen released the cookbook Tea Table, Inspiring Teatime Creations from California's Central Coast. And I'm so thrilled to be talking about it with you here, Karen. I will go ahead and bring you up to share the screen. And let me just make sure your audio, you might need to unmute. Oh,
I'm unmuted.
Beautiful. Oh, well, welcome to the screen.
Thank you.
So glad that you're here.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound great.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening, and thank you, Bookshop Santa Cruz. Before I say anything about the book, I do want to say my history with Bookshop Santa Cruz goes back to when I first came to the US in the 80s, when they were located across the road in their original building. And it's always been one of my favorite bookshops. So here it is over 30 years later that we're doing a virtual book signing. Is really special for multiple reasons, including the history I have with the love of the store. So it's always been great, and that they've survived the bookstore mania of bookshops closing and so forth, and still going strong. So whenever you're in Santa Cruz, please go to Bookshop Santa Cruz. It's a great destination for all the family. Well, thanks for joining tonight, and I'm very happy to be here with you. And I'm going to hold my book up here too. Some of you may already have it, but as Cheryl said, please stop by the bookshop and get your copies if you don't. One of the things I want to point out with the book is when I put it together, because I love parties so much, I purposely designed it that at the back, at the very back, there are a couple of blank pages. And they were purposely put there so that when I have book parties, such as this one, or private book parties in your home, which we're now doing, you can make notes about the things that I share. So if you have your copy with you tonight, then I recommend that you turn to the blank page and know that it's there to make notes. The whole project of Tea Table just sort of came about partly pandemic wise. I'd often said I would want to write a cookbook, but didn't know what it would be about. And I love lemons. So I always thought it would be a book about lemons. But in the very beginning of the book, I describe how I found a table just sitting outside a local home with a sign that said free. And it eventually became part of the book. And so I decided with the pandemic going on, initially the book, I was going to call it Tea at the Cottage, because my little tea cottage that's here in Pacific Grove seemed like an ideal spot to sort of focus on with all the customers that have come in over time. But when the pandemic started to close things down, I realized that maybe we won't be having tea at the cottage as much anymore, and wanting to fit in with what we were working with for the future. And so that's how I got the idea to start taking the table to different ocean settings and, starting to put the ideas together of making this book somewhat a travel book for people that like a destination to come to and want to explore. If you're on the East Coast or some other part of the country, I thought it would be a fun thing that you live somewhere else and this book could become not just a recipe book, but a guidebook. You could come on a trip to Pacific Grove and find the different locations that I featured in the area, and use it as just a fun little way to travel somewhere. And the other ideas for the locals is to do the same, except the locals have the fortunate location of being here more often, that they can frequent those spots and do picnics in different places featured in the book. And so it really just grew over time, and it was very inspiring to see it grow page by page. Patricia Hamilton, locally here, runs Pacific Grove Books. And when I contacted a friend, Chef Mary Chamberlain, and asked about her book, she guided me to Patricia, and I asked Patricia what I needed to do. So any of you out there that have that desire to start writing your memoir or writing something that you want to put into print, I highly recommend contacting Patricia Hamilton, and her information is in the front of the book as well. Patricia guided me to say I should just make notes and write things down and document them. And so I did, and it seemed to be Sundays were my day. Sunday mornings, I'd just sort of jot something down and I'd play in the kitchen, check with my husband and son, how does this taste, and started doing pictures in the garden and so forth. And little by little, the recipes just started coming to life. But also I wanted to keep in mind all the people I've met over the years as I've been cooking in different parts of the world, and things that they say. And many people will say they're maybe intimidated to have me come for dinner because I'm a chef. Those of you that have invited me to dinner many times know that's not the case. I'm a very plain eater, not fussy at all about food, just very plain, basic palate. And that too shows in the book. However, coming into the idea of people working from home, I started thinking about things that have not been easy for me when I followed a recipe, which I don't do too often. And one of those things was I find it often frustrating to want to make something and you don't have that ingredient, and it means a trip out to the shops to go and buy what you need. And so I thought it would be nice to keep the ingredients as basic as possible, and therefore it makes the audience have an easy time. And if you are home on a quiet day and you just want to pick up the book and make something, maybe there's a chance you have the ingredients to be able to put one of the items together and you don't have to go into a lot of hassle of doing lots of shopping and so forth. So there is a shopping list in the front of the book, and I'm just going to try and find that page. The shopping list is listed right here. And so basically, if you go through that and do a sort of checklist that you have those items in your pantry and your fridge, you should be able to make almost everything just about that's in the book. And there are 22 easy recipes. I settled on 22. As I said, I'm not a recipe chef, so it was a lot of work for me to fine tune the recipes, which with the help of not just my husband and son, but dear Josie Cowden, who edited the book and is a Santa Cruz resident, she also became my recipe tester. And I didn't want to make Josie's life too difficult either by providing her with cumbersome recipes. So everything is very basic for a reason. And the idea and the premise of the book is to encourage you, the reader, going back to what I've heard from people over the years, in addition to them feeling intimidated, inviting me to dinner. One of the things I often hear is, I don't know how to do that, or I wouldn't know how to do that. And so my whole goal with the book is to try and awaken that sense of creativity within the reader. So I know that's not all of you. Some of you are fine bakers and chefs yourself. And so for you, it should hopefully be no challenge. And these recipes you can maybe get to memorize and put them together just like that. But for others that feel intimidated by recipes and cookbooks, I'm hoping that this one allows you some freedom and flexibility and guidance to realize, if you don't have a particular spice or herb, that you have the confidence to substitute it with something else, or know that it might be okay to leave that particular thing out. Now, baking's a science, right? So certain things, self-raising flour, if that's in anything, or plain flour needing the baking powder, that's probably something you don't want to omit. But if you don't have the raisins and you tend to not want to put them in, say, a scone or whatever, then that's fine. So just keep that in mind when it comes to certain substitutions, that things such as baking powder, baking soda, those really are there for a reason. So not as easy to substitute. The book also, tells the story of how to make a proper cup of tea right here at the beginning. It seems like such an easy thing to do. But have you ever had a cup of tea that wasn't steeped properly because the water wasn't hot? And at my tea shop that I've had in the past in Monterey, that would happen a couple of times where once in a while the tea would go out and the water hadn't been properly boiled. And we'd get this murky looking teapot of liquid. Once a customer added milk to their tea, it wouldn't work because that water needs to be at a certain temperature so the tea can properly steep. And so, as simple as it may be, how to make the perfect cuppa is well worth a read, that section of the book. And that is on page 10. And for those of you that know, it's just a little refresher. You might learn something new in there. But for those of you that don't and have never really put any thought into it, it will really give you a good, proper method of making a nice steep cup of tea that you can enjoy with a splash of milk or cream, or as I like to, with a little slice of lemon in there. So do pay attention to that. And mentioning also that it's fun for children. I've had some friends tell me that their kids, boys as well as girls, in fact, my son uses the book often now to make things for himself. Kids of all ages, the teenagers can handle the recipes somewhat alone. Younger kids, of course, with guidance. But I've been told by some that this is their kind of book in regards to a young boy saying that. Part of it may be the fun of the pictures and the layout, the simplicity of it. And going back to the photos and the colors and everything else, as it explains on the back, I've got different things that the book is good for. And one is joy, that it's a picture book that makes you feel good. And so each picture that I included, things like cake that I made, any of the pictures that you see behind the development and the frame of that photo was always to try and bring a good feel to the person looking at that photo. So in today's world of mental health, we've got a lot of that going on with the shutdown and everything else. It also becomes a wonderful gift book for someone who might be feeling down. It's also great for someone, as we've said, that doesn't live in the area, that's not by the ocean and not by the water. If you know anyone in that sort of situation, it's not really there for them to make the recipes per se, but as a picture book in that light, so that they can look at the photos and it will help cheer them up. And it is one of the most popular things that I hear from people, is they love the book and the colors and the photographs in there. So consider it a nice picture book too. Um, Going back also into the recipes, one of my favorites here is at the very beginning. It's the celery soup. And this was a recipe I developed probably about 20 years ago when I would cater lots of events in people's homes. And it's a lovely, rich, buttery soup. But keeping health in mind, I've tended to use a lot of olive oil with some of the recipes, and you can switch those oils around. But it's a very simple soup. It uses a part of the celery that we often throw out, put in the compost bin, don't pay any attention to, and that's the celery leaves. And so by using those leaves, you get such a strong flavor, and it's such a basic recipe, but adds so much nourishment. You can top it off with all sorts of things. So again, with it being a basic recipe for St. Patrick's Day last week, I served it up with crumbled bacon, Irish cheddar cheese. If you want to add some more vegetables and greens, you can put in finely diced spinach or kale. So here's one idea to write down in regards to those notes in the back, and that is with that celery soup, are the different things that you like. So I've given you here just the basic recipes. The guidance part in terms of inspiration comes from each individual person. When I worked as a personal chef, it was always important, and still is, for me to know what people like and what they don't like. And so it may be as simple for you as writing down some of your favorite things. Do you really love mushrooms, onions, garlic? Are you a big fan of ham or smoked salmon, whatever it may be? And focusing on what you and your family members and your guests enjoy, and even going as far as if you were going to invite someone over to enjoy something that you're making, is to take a moment to ask them what they like. Maybe you know them well and you don't need to, but if you don't, it's always nice to find out what a guest likes or a family member likes, and try and incorporate that into what you're making. So that little seed already has planted some inspiration for you, because it then gives you the guidance of what you can maybe throw into this soup. In addition, you could put the mushrooms in there or anything else. So celery leaf soup on page 17, consider it again a basic base of a recipe. You can have it as is, or you can doctor it up as much as you'd like for you and your family and friends. Um, Having got the book out last year and been able to send it to different parts of the world, and for people to be able to purchase it in different parts of the world, it's been really fun to hear the various responses. And again, for people in England who know these recipes well, something like sausage rolls, they're a common thing there. It's given them a new take on how to make those standard English recipes, partly because I wanted to make health a part of the book as well. So it's not just a book with tea recipes, but it's a book with tea recipes that's thinking about your health. It's thinking about heart health and low salt and blood pressure and all the different things that happen over time to people. And if you're going through treatment of some sort, it's a way to help personal chef those items for you too. So, you know, the sausage rolls are made not with your standard pastry that often might use Crisco or butter, but instead it's a basic olive oil pastry. And again, another good note for the back of your book is that this pastry recipe, it's also used in the quiche recipe that I've included, but that is not where the limit stops. You can keep on, you can use that pastry to make meat pies, apple pies, pumpkin pies, You can use the pastry to make turnovers. So whenever pastry is required in something, you've got a very basic, easy pastry recipe that's heart healthy. Gone is the heavy cholesterol from the butter that you might usually use, or the Crisco, and now you've got some Heart Smart olive oil added in there. Likewise, you can bulk that Heart Smartness up, and you could add a little tablespoon or so of flax. You could add a little tablespoon of chopped herbs, Parmesan cheese, and something like cheese straws. If you've ever heard of cheese straws, they're a fun little English item that could be served with a tea, and it's basically the pastry with cheese. It could be cheddar, anything flavorful, Parmesan mixed into the pastry, and then you just roll it out and you make little lengths and twists and bake those off in the oven, and you have this delicious little savory bite. You can add cayenne pepper to that and add a little bit of a kick with some heat. And so those sort of ideas, this is where the book goes from being 22 recipes, and before you know it, you've got 30 recipes, 35 recipes with the variety of things that you can make. So I do want to stop, Cheryl, and just check in to see if anyone has any questions, or if you yourself have any questions for me, so I don't keep rambling.
It's absolutely wonderful to hear you talk, and it's so fluid. So thank you for sharing about so many great pieces of the book. We do have some questions coming in, and yeah, maybe you want to take a couple of them now. We have a question about, you had been talking about substitutions a little bit. There's a question from Sherry about coconut oil. Can you use coconut oil instead of olive oil, and will the recipes work with either?
Yes, I definitely recommend that you give it a try. Often with the coconut oil, it's already solidified and you just need to melt that down. So just use it 1-for-1 in terms of your measurements. And I don't think you should have too much of a problem, but it's definitely worth giving it a go. And if you find that, as an example, just speaking about the pastry, let's say you made the pastry and used the coconut oil in place of the olive oil. If it seemed too dry, then go ahead and try it again, just add a little bit more. If on the reverse it seemed too oily, add a little bit less. You just need that little bit of experimentation. And hopefully, as I said, with most of these recipes, you can get to that point where you can memorize them. So imagine going to someone's house for Thanksgiving and somebody forgets the pie, and you've made this pastry recipe so often that you can just whip it up just like that. And so that's the goal. Yeah.
I love that idea. I wish I was capable of doing that. That's so cool.
Oh, see, keep reading.
I know. It's like, I love the inspiration to try it and to have that empowerment and to just try and see what works. That's just so lovely. Someone in the chat had also mentioned that they were going to maybe try their gluten-free flour mix instead, which seems like that would totally work as well.
Sure. With gluten-free, you do want to be careful. Things such as rice flour. Rice flour is very grainy, and it doesn't mold together or hold together well. So a lot of times when I do gluten-free baking, it may be necessary to sometimes combine those flours. So I like using coconut flour and almond flour, depending on the person who can have it. Maybe they're allergic to something that they can't have those. But I do recommend sometimes with gluten-free items to combine the different types of flours. Let's see, quinoa flour is a good one for baking. It binds well. Almond, as I said, and coconut flour. Spelt flour is another one. So yes, by all means, those recipes can be used with those. Give them a try. Yeah.
Beautiful. We have a question about, this is interesting. Tammy's asking, is there a particular flow to follow when making a high tea, like how to keep the scones hot?
Good question. So that just based on hot and cold. Let me keep it simple. So hot and cold, think hot and cold. What are the things that are going to be served cold? Whatever they are, you can make those in advance for the most part. It could be the lemonade that can be in the fridge, staying cold. It could be, your tea sandwiches. Those can be made in advance, kept cold in the fridge. Any of the cookies, if you're doing cookies, those can be made in advance, kept at room temp, the cake. So then you're left with the scones. If you've got enough time, then go ahead and make those the morning of, so that they're at room temperature when your guests come. If you don't have the time, you can make them in advance, you can freeze them, and then you just need to preheat that oven and warm them through before serving. So rule of thumb, and an easy one, would be just to think hot versus cold. Getting those cold things, as we say in the chef world, en place. Mise en place is to get ready and prepare. En place, you're ready. And so if you have those cold items en place, then you're good to go, getting the warm ones to go with. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it makes me want to get out my pen and take some notes in the back of the book. I love that you have some blank pages back there. That is so lovely. We have a question here from Linda about, and you have this on page 13. Can you talk about the various types of tea, high tea, cream tea, and afternoon tea? And you have kind of a definition here, which is lovely.
Sure. So yes, with the different types of tea, which incidentally, the book, again, I designed it so when you purchase the book, you now have the capability to put together a cream tea, an afternoon tea, a high tea. And many people think cream tea is having a cup of tea with cream in it. And you're close, because maybe you're doing that. But it's basically having scones with your cream, curd, jam, whatever you're going to put on your scones is actually a cream tea. So that's, if you're getting started, that would be the best one to start with. And you learn how to make your proper pot of tea, and then you make your scones, and you get your sides ready. And in England, it's been a big thing for many years, different parts of the country. They talk about, do you put the cream on the scone first or the jam on the scone first? So down in Cornwall, which is the home of clotted cream and Devonshire cream and scones, they tend to say your jam goes on first and then you put your cream on top. Other parts of the country, so same with, do you put your milk in hot or cold? So you decide. But that's the cream tea. Afternoon tea, that one is usually served around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's when you're feeling a little bit tired, you need that little bit of a pick-me-up, and there's some history about that with the whole tea time page too on page 12. Afternoon tea is basically some savories and a few sweets and your tea. So I've given some little guidance as to how to use the different recipes in the book, but let's say a couple of tea sandwiches, some scones, and your tea would be enough to constitute an afternoon tea. And nowadays, the different types of teas are enjoyed any time of day. There are so many tea cafes, and people are just into having tea more these days than they were, say, 30 years ago in this way. So, you can have that cream tea as a little, it could be a breakfast. You could meet someone or have someone come over for breakfast, and that could be what you serve. Afternoon tea could be lunch. It could be, an afternoon snack, as it's meant to be. I like doing afternoon tea after school. Kids come over and they have afternoon tea, and it's just like a fun, everybody's been at school and work all day, and it's not dinner, but it will hold you off until, a late dinner, supper time. And then your high tea is more of a supper, and it's, if you have high tea, then you won't need dinner. So typically it would be served at 6 o'clock in the evening, and it would be a bigger combination of savories. In England, again, they often would have things like pork pies or Scotch eggs, which are boiled eggs wrapped with sausage and then deep fried with breadcrumbs. And then those, along with your sweets, your scones, your cakes, your Victoria sandwich, your fruit. It could even be something like what we call bubble and squeak, which isn't a fancy thing, but it's leftover cabbage and potatoes. You could throw something together like that, sort of like a potato patty, and make them into small bites. So it's savories, again, but more of them. So that is more of a laborious, grand affair where you have a nice variety of things for your high tea. So it's nothing to do with the height. A lot of people think that high tea is to do with the tier. I often use tall tiered stands, but it's nothing to do with the height. It's just to do with what's served and how much of it is served.
As in there's more of it.
More of it, more savories, more sweets, more variety. So you've got, sort of smorgasbord of items to pick from. And that is, as I said, you don't need dinner after that.
Gotcha. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I always thought it just meant like fancy, like elevated.
Right. Yes. No.
Go ahead. Sorry. Yeah, I was just looking for that really sweet picture in here of the girls enjoying afternoon tea, maybe after school.
Oh yes. Yes. They are. They're at a baby shower on that one, but they're the perfect That's the perfect time and the perfect look. That's why they dress so fancy. So you can switch it to school uniforms or sweatshirts. And that leads me to another thing too about fashion and clothing. And so I love wearing jeans. Anybody that knows me, I often have on my jeans, but I do like to dress up as well. Um, my whole idea of putting this book together is how I've ran my business for years, is to promote a casual tea time. And so, as an example, at my shop in Monterey, we would have people come in their finest wares, big hats, high heels, and we would have people come in with their arms tattooed with gorgeous art, t-shirts, Birkenstocks. It's everybody. And so a lot of times with the whole idea of high tea, or any type of tea, it invokes the fanciness and it has to be upper crust. And I like the idea that we can all use a china cup. And obviously, you can be drinking out of a teacup in your t-shirt, but if you want to have a reason to dress up, which people don't maybe dress up as much anymore, it's a nice mix of casual. So a silk shirt with a pair of nice jeans and, having some fine food, there you go. Purposely done. And so we live in such a casual place, California casual. So I wanted to sort of bring about that California casual theme of tea time.
I love that. Thank you for that background. It kind of makes me think of, there's a little piece in the book about the wicker table and the kind of serendipity of that special tea table. And folks that have the book or that are going to buy it, you'll see it, that Karen found it kind of on the side of the road, and that you love how lovely that can be to find the perfect piece that you're looking for.
Yes.
So it just reminds you of that kind of serendipity, like you can have something that you found be part of your, your sacred, your special moment there, which I
right. Here's the table on page 7. And it really is, it's somebody's old table. The bottom's kind of worn, but it has these cute drawers and the wood inside is very nice, and it just caught my eye. And at the time, I probably put together maybe 3 or 4 of the recipes and had this idea of putting the book together. And then I said to the family, how about the idea of I travel with the table and just stage the food on it? And so then it became this little travel book. And so, yes, when there's nothing better than hearing somebody say, oh, I just moved into an apartment or a new home and we really needed a something or other for this corner, just couldn't find one. And what do you know, when you're driving around one day, there's something on the side of the road and it says free, and you put it in your car and you found what you were looking for. And so that serendipity just sort of meant to be. Little did I know that the table was going to become what it did and be part of this book that's seen around the world by different people. And, I haven't yet gone to the house and told the people that their old table's featured in a book.
Yeah,
so if you're watching that,
such a good destiny for that table. Yeah, I love that.
Right. And so, and then the other thing I wanted to promote too, in terms of the book, is, as I was saying earlier on, with the pandemic and having to do things outdoors and on the move, that these recipes too are easy to make for picnics and take in with you places. With the sandwiches here on page 23, there's the sandwiches there. The sandwiches, like I was saying earlier, use yourself, your guest and your family as a guide as to what they like. There's a reason that my chicken sandwich recipe, the curried chicken, uses avocado, and it's because I don't like mayonnaise. So I was not going to put mayonnaise anywhere in the book. So by all means, you can substitute and put mayonnaise in there, but I do like avocados, and that's how I enjoy using avocado as a binding agent. And again, it's heart healthy. And so keeping up with that idea of keeping things healthy and everything else. Maybe about 15 years ago, I was a personal chef, or not a personal chef, a personal trainer, as well as a personal chef. So that's why health is a big thing for me. I love exercise and fitness and everything else. And so I really like to incorporate that into each thing that I do. The cucumber sandwiches over here, they're made with a round cutter as opposed to cutting the crust off the bread. If any of you have done a tea from the book yet and made the sandwiches, you'll see that it's a lot of work. it's not easy. So if you decide to have even 4 or 8 people come over for tea, you're going to be doing lots of crust cutting and everything else. But using a cutter is something fun that the kids can do. They don't need a knife. It's just cutting into the bread. And it's fun to, again, get the family involved and have people do different little tricks and things to help out. Speaking of kids, one of my favorite recipes too in the book is the strawberry lemonade. This is one of my favorites, and my son Andrew loves to make this. But one of the tips to write down in the back in terms of notes with this one is not only is it kid friendly, but if you're having the adults over and you decide you want to make margaritas or daiquiris, this is a really ideal base. Add a splash of tequila or add a splash of rum, and you've got a nice beverage for the adults. Serve it over ice in a fancy glass and you're good to go. So your strawberry lemonade goes from being just a family favorite to now being used in the bar as a mixer. It can be used as a martini aid. You can do all sorts with it. So it's a base. A lot of these are bases for things. And for the cupcakes and the queen cakes that I call them here. So these are on page 39. And these queen cakes were how my business sort of got started when I was about 11 years old in England. I used to sell cakes to the corner shop. I get my entrepreneurial spirit, I think, from my dad. And he was a storekeeper in Jamaica, and he was an avid gardener, and he would sell the garden tomatoes to the local corner shop. And so I was around 10, 11, I'd take my queen cakes and sell them to the corner shop when he sold his tomatoes there. And so this one recipe for queen cakes, based on what you use to bake in, can become then the larger cake we were looking at earlier. You can make it into what we call a Victoria sandwich cake and add preserves in the center and powdered sugar on top. So again, it's another recipe that can be used for different things. You could add extra lemon and lemon zest and cranberries, let's say, and then bake it in a small loaf pan, and it could become a breakfast bread. So again, basic recipe that you can play around with. If you like making a soaking syrup or anything like that, you can boil some sugar and lemon and pour it on top and let that sit. So again, just starting off with a base. I'm going to check in with you again. Any other questions?
Yeah, that's so great. And yeah, I was going to mention too, when you were talking about the cutting the crust, you mentioned you can use those crusts then to make breadcrumbs later. So
correct. Yes.
I love the versatility. It's so great.
Yes. And those breadcrumbs are used in the recipes too. Yeah.
Love it. We have some more great questions, and folks, if you have questions, you can pop them in the Q&A tab. Thank you so much for these wonderful questions. Jennifer is wondering if you prefer savory or sweet scones, and what do you best like in your scones?
I love sweet scones. I got a sweet tooth, but I do like savory scones too. And I love cranberries, dates, walnuts, love lemon. So anything with lemon in there. And I even love doing strawberries and fresh cream. I'll put those in too. So just about any scone is my favorite. I'm not too keen on currant scones, and they tend to burn a little bit on the bottom. So I'm not a big favorite of those, but I love using, in the autumn, I love using apples. I make apple scones, and I pre-chop the apples and put cinnamon on them and then mix them in, and they're delicious in the scones as well. So any number of different things I enjoy. When you're using summer fruits such as raspberries and blackberries, just be careful, they have a bit of a more water content, so you might find that your scone drops a little flatter, doesn't rise as much because you're adding a little bit more liquid putting those in. Yeah, and savory ones I do like too with the soup. I love different rich cheeses mixed into a savory scone, and even a little bit of bacon too is great. Chives, green onions, and pepper flakes are also lovely.
Do you keep a garden?
I do, yes. Yeah, my husband gardens, we garden, and so we have fresh herbs and chard and kale and lots of different herbs to play around with. So it's nice to have those things in the garden. Yeah.
Oh, lovely. Yeah. And what about, that kind of leads to a question from Joanne. Is there any information in the book about creating your own teas using herbs from the garden?
There is not. No, didn't put that in there. I did include fresh herbs that get used in, but did not add anything like using fresh mint to make a tea or anything like that. But that
Mhm.
is a very basic thing to do, is if you have fresh mint, you can just steep it in hot water and it makes a lovely mint tea. Likewise, fennel does a similar thing. Using fresh fennel is nice for that too. Yeah.
I've been really enjoying like a licorice and fennel tea from a tea bag.
Exactly.
I love it.
Yes, and good for you, definitely.
Mm,
Yeah,
mhm.
good palate cleansers. Mhm.
Yum. We have a question about, we'd love to hear more about your parents and what inspired you to name your business after them. You mentioned your father, so I'd love to
Yes,
hear more about that.
yes, yeah. So interesting time for that this week. My mom and dad moved to England in the 1950s, and my dad owned a grocery store, a little corner shop in Jamaica. And when he moved to England, then he set about working. He worked in a glass factory, was a glass maker, so complete different trade
Wow.
and not self-employed, but he somewhat remained that entrepreneur with his garden. We always had half of the garden was all beautiful roses,
Hmm.
and the other half was always vegetables. And so we were doing farm to table way back then. My mom would go out and pick the carrots, and the soil in England's very rich, so the garden was very hearty, and potatoes, and he grew everything: cucumbers, zucchini, and peppers and tomatoes. And so we had, wasn't a farm, but it may as well have been, because it supplied a lot for us at home. And my dad passed away in 2001.
Mm.
And at the time, my business was personal chefing, and I called it Karen Ann's Personal Chef Service. And I had expanded at that time, was changing and about to get my first commercial kitchen, wanted to do catering, but at the time we had the Yellow Pages, which was filled with caterers in the area. And I thought, well, how can I set myself apart and find my own little niche? And so I realized I love tea. And so I thought, well, let's think of a formal name. And at 2 a.m., which is when I usually get my name ideas, I woke my husband up, I got a name, Eddison Melrose. And so that's how it came about. And it was basically a tribute to my dad, having lost my dad, and realized that, my mom's still alive, just turned 90 last year. And thought it would be a nice tribute to them to name the business after them. So that's how that came
Mother's,
about.
is your mother
Yeah,
still living in England?
she is. She's in
Okay.
Kent. Yes. And it's, and most of the family's still in Europe and in England, apart from my sister and I are here.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. So I'm sorry, has your mom been able to travel to visit your tea shop?
She has. She's been to all of my locations. I've had 3 different commercial kitchen locations, and thankfully she's visited all 3 and been able to have tea. And before social media days, customers that were in when she was there, I announce and say Melrose is in the house. It is their middle names, so not their first names. And so it was just
Such
sort of a
beautiful
fun.
names. Yeah, they work
Yeah,
really well for the.
yes, they do. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I'm
So,
sure your father would be very proud, and that I love that
uh,
he's still living on through your work, and that's beautiful.
thank you. Yeah, thank you.
And we'd love a customer or an attendee here, Susie, would love to know more about your tea shop in Pacific Grove. Is there seating or is it a
Mhm.
takeout place? Can you tell us more about it?
Right. So post-pandemic, we are still just doing to go, and so I continue to develop fun to go items. So make them really pretty, and they're set up as items that you can make and have as a picnic. So we don't have an indoor seating spot anymore. It's still there, but I don't use it for seating, and so everything is to go at this point in time. And that's mainly as well because with the granola business that we do, it allows me more time to do that. And so the teas I'm able to do on Fridays usually, and some Saturdays, and keep my creativity going and keep the area happy having a tea service there. Yeah.
Love it. That's so great. And so do you like to read books? We have a question from one of actually Bookshop's best readers here, Jennifer. She's wondering a favorite book you've read recently.
Oh, a favorite book of mine has been I got to think of his name, Justin Spring.
Hmm.
And it's a book about chefs. It's about chefs that live in France during the, let's say, 50s, 40s, Julia Child, MFK Fisher. So it's a food book. And I've got to think of the name, Gourmands. So
Oh,
I
good
have
job,
to
you
look it up
remembered
and
it. That's hard.
oh, yeah. But Justin has put together quite a memoir of people living in France during the time when Americans weren't that familiar with French cooking, and how the French influence was then brought back to America. Yeah, so
Wow.
it's been wonderful. So look up Justin Spring is the
Justin
name,
Spring.
and I can peek and see.
Yeah, maybe we
Tell
can
you what it is.
pop it in the chat.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of it's so fun to hear. I think you mentioned you have this lovely line in the early in the book, kind of introducing it about what tea time is and how you call it a kind moment to kind of take a little bit of quiet and settle down and just read and enjoy. And so it's just, yeah, I love that it's an opportunity to kind of do the things that we love and take a little moment to ourselves.
Definitely, and it's a very simple thing to do. So it's almost as a meditative type thing to do, to give yourself the time to enjoy a cup of tea, a pot of tea, even just waiting for the water to boil. It gives you a moment of zen to just focus on that one thing, to pour the water over the leaves, to allow the time for the flavors to come out, and then to sit and enjoy it. And then to add to that, you've got a lovely cup if you want to use a beautiful cup or teapot. And even if it's 10, 15 minutes, it's a little break from the busy life that we have, phones and, all kinds of interruptions and the busyness of the day. So I think it's a very soothing thing to do. Yeah.
Love that.
Highly recommend.
Yes, and you have it is I've been getting so much more into tea lately, just over the past year, and just something that my boyfriend and we've started getting more and more tea in the cabinet. It's like so many choices of kinds. You mentioned in the book, it's like, it can be any, it doesn't matter what time of day anymore, just, you can have it.
Right. Exactly.
I love that, because you can have black tea in the morning and then maybe a fruit tea in the afternoon, or maybe something licoricey at night. There's so many options now.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah, definitely. And if it's too hot, you can ice it. I still drink hot tea, even if it is a hot day. And then there's times when it's so hot that maybe I just want to have some ice on there as well. So it's a nice way to enjoy the different teas. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Health benefits. I'm looking at that book.
Yeah. Thank you. Jennifer, pop that in the chat. Thank you so much. So I'd love to hear what's next for you. Are you going to be focusing on the granola and the tea shop, or what projects do you have brewing right now?
So what I'm doing now is I'm doing more book parties, as I mentioned earlier. So sort of themed off a typical Tupperware style party where you can host a gathering and invite your friends over, whether it be a birthday party or just a group of people getting together. And we have a private discussion about the book. Again, there's more things to share that you can make your notes. If your guests don't have the book, then I show up with either the hardcovers or the softcover books that you've pre-ordered, and then they each get signed individually for each guest. And then I also make whatever you choose for me to make from the book to bring to the party. And that way the guests are actually enjoying something that's made from one of the book recipes. And it's just a nice chance to get people together. It's a nice little social event. And it's a good way, again, to share what's in the book and keep building upon those recipes.
Oh, I love that.
So that's my next focus, and traveling around to different areas with the book. So kind of like a book tour far and wide.
Yeah, oh, that's lovely. I feel like it really blends your personal chef experience with your entrepreneurial and your authorship. It kind of brings it all in one.
Yes.
Package.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Right. So it makes it fun, and makes it fun for traveling as well, to go to different places. And eventually I would like to put together another book. So I'll be working on that hopefully in the next 2 years or so.
And if someone was interested in having a book party, would they contact you through your website?
Yes, they can go to the website if they don't know how to contact me already, and just click on the contact, and they can email or send a text message or call me to get the conversation started.
Wonderful. Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, hopefully when your next book comes out, we can welcome you back either virtually or in person. It's fun to be able to yeah, exactly. Either way. Yeah. You're just down on the other side of the bay. So
Right.
love that we have you as our neighbor and an author in the store. It's such an honor to celebrate the book with you a year later, but you know, it doesn't matter.
It's birthday time.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Karen. This has been such a lovely evening. For folks that don't yet have, again, we do have hardcovers as well as soft covers, and they are signed. You definitely don't want to miss it. If you don't have a copy yet, please go ahead and grab one from Bookshop Santa Cruz. Any final thoughts or anything else you'd like to leave us with?
Just thank you for joining tonight, and stay in touch. If you have a book or get one in the future, reach out to me anytime. I'm very happy to answer questions, help with ideas, and send friends your way. And one big favor, as I said, is also keep it in mind as a gift. It's a lovely gift for all ages, and it really is a good feel-good book. So if you know of anyone going through a tough time, I feel it's a great thing to help them through.
Definitely.
Thank you all for being here.
Lovely.
Thank you, Bookshop Santa Cruz and Cheryl.
Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you again soon. And thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good evening. Bye.
Bye.